No? Okay. Just since the material I'm going to try to cover this evening is so vast, I'd like just to give an overview of what we're going to try to do. There is a mitzvah of Teichacha, which is Reish Hey, and the question is, what's the Teichacha about? Is it about a person preventing a person from doing Aveira, or a person who is a Baal Aveira to give him a Teichacha? And then when there's an interpersonal Aveira between X and Y, what's the relationship to that in the mitzvah? And one of the most important issues, which I like to talk about, is the Ram is going to make a statement about Pshuta Shel Mikra, and then we'll be able to understand maybe where the Pirush Makubal and the Pshuta Shel Mikra go in different ways, how you understand the mitzvah and what's going on. And that will be very, very important. Then we get to the mitzvah after Acha Kamoicha. We're going to have to discuss how do you do the mitzvah, because pshuta, the translation of avo, is an emotional love. The Rambam, if you recall, the beginning of Shurish Chi talks about that the mitzvah of Yaftarach Kamocha you do with what you call midas, the character traits. And to the best of my knowledge, love is not a character trait, and maybe it is, I know. But, we'll have to understand what all this means. And further on, we'll have to understand whether the mitzvah of Afterach Kamoicha is midas or pulos, and what exactly does it mean? Do I love my fellow man as I love myself? Is that real? Is it not real? Is it an exaggeration? And then even if we interpret it as exaggeration, there'll be two different takes on it between the Ram and the Ramban and Chumash. And let's, I guess, get started. That's an overview of what we're against. And, I'd be very happy if we finish these two mitzvahs, because the issues are very profound and long. The Rambam Sefer Mitzvas here in the Reish Hey, Mitzvah Chomesh Umosayim, Hi Shetzivonu Loichiach Hachete. The kapach limches beise avera. The question is, it's a what is the mitzvah modus operandi to get the guy to do tshuva, or maybe to stop him from doing averas? Because he adds on over here, Omi sheyirtze lachtoi. You're talking about someone who is on the way. We see it has a lot to be chayte. V'limnoya oisay mimenu b'mayma v'teichacha. In kapach lahasiram al kach b'dvorim u'loichichai. It's to convince him not to be chayte. So when you're talking about chet, or see, the question is, how are you going to can it? Because the Gemara in Eichin on Tezayin Beis, minayin luroye bechaveroi dova maguna, whatever that happens to be, שחייב להוכיחוי, שנאמר הוכח תוכיח. הוכיחוי ולא קיבל מניין שיחזיר לכם וכולי וכולי. So here, the Ram L'chur is mechadish that the Mitzvas techocha, because the way he's talking about O mi sheyirtze lachtoi v'lim noya oisoi mimenu, because it even, how do you read it? Is v'lim limno oisoi mimenu goes on both the chayte and the person who wants to be chayte. Because you look over here, v'lim chayis b'oisa v'veira kapach over mi shezoimim la'asoisa v'lahazhiro al kach b'dvorim v'lhoichichoi. So limchois b'oisa v'veira mishu la'azhirom l'cheira. It's not clear whether the whole purpose is to monea future chet, or to a person who is a chayte, or a person is about to be chayte, and it's the same purpose, to be monei chet. V'ein odom, especially the continuation, v'ein odom rashoi, loime ani loy echete, I won't sin, v'im yechete, which is in the future, ani lo echete, v'im yechete, Zulosi ze inyonim elokov. It's between him and God. So he's not allowed to say that. Ze neged atera, or hepech atera. Elo onu mitzuvim sheloi na'avo v'lo anichu seinu moseinu la'avo. Umish shezoimim la'avo chayva al kol odom loichicho l'monoi. The alpha pishal is kaimel of edus hamachayeves bitzua oinish, even though there's no edus for oinish. So you get the impression, reading again and again, that the whole discussion over here in Sefer Mitzvas is to stop. Echt loy v'im yechte, but if in the second case he was already chayte, so the purpose is not to get him to do tshuva. The purpose is that he shouldn't be chayte anymore. The interesting thing over here is it's not clear at all if this idea of a person's about to be chayte or wants to be chayte, the mitzvah hochach applies to him at all. It's like turning the world upside down between Sefer Mitzvahs and Mishnah Torah. Because the Ram says in Perek Vov Halacha Zayin, Roy lechaveiroi shechota or sheholich b'derech leitova mitzvah lachziroi lemutov ulodiah shu chayte ha'atzma ma'asav haroyim. So first of all, he says lachziroi lemutov. It's not to stop him. It's not like a roidev who's about to kill and to stop him from killing. It's to make him turn back the clock, and he should be an upstanding member of society. Lachziroi lemutov. That's one. But the question is, what's derech lo tova? Derech lo tova means he's on the way to do chet, and this is Sefer Mitzvahs, and he's just reproducing in Mishnah Torah. Or derech lo tova means something else. So I would tell you clearly, and I tried to research this, that Mishnah Torah, derech le'tova, does not mean it is another way to do chet. And I'll give you some examples of it. And if you disagree with me, I'm ready to hear. The Rambam in Hilchos Deis you might be you in Perek Vav Halacha Aleph. V'cheinim hoye Medina talks about a person should make sure that his surroundings are a positive influence on him. V'chein im hoye Medina sheminagoseh royim v'ein anoshim holchim b'derech yishara yelech lemokim she'anshe hatzadikim uvenoigim b'derech tova. V'im hoye kol ha'medinos shu yoidi v'shomea shmuasem noigim b'derech le'tova k'mo zmanenu. So the derech le'tova is either midos or a way of what his persona is about, but it's not just that he's on his way to do chet, because derech le'tova is the opposite of hochim b'derech yishara. Yelech lemokim she'anshe hatzadikim v'noigim b'derech tovim. So it's a proper way of action, but it's difficult to say that he means there also he's on his way to do chet. So I would say here by us also not on the way to do chet. And in other places in Mishnah Torah, you also get the impression derech le'tova has nothing to do with the person on his way to do chet. If you look at the Ram Hilchos Talmud Torah, Perek Daled, Halacha Aleph, Ein melamdin Torah el Talmud Hogun, no b'maisav, o letam, av mehoya holich b'derech le'tova, machzirin oisei lemuta, umanhigin oisei b'derech yishara. So l'cheira, it's either from the word derech in it's referring to midos, but it's certainly not on the way to do chet. So then it comes out a very interesting thing, that the mitzvah teichacha in Sefer Mitzvas is to prevent chet, and the purpose is not even to make him do tshuva, just to prevent chet. Like there's a roidef on his way to do an aveira, you stop him cold. In Mishnah Torah, it's not about stopping a person from doing aveira, but the teichacha is the way we normally, or we're brought up, is to get the guy to do tshuva and be an upstanding member of society. Interesting, Rav Sadi Goin in his Sefer Mitzvas is like the Rambam Mishnah Torah. In Perek Yud Gimel, the mitzvah between Yisrael and Lo Yisrael, page 97, V'imra'o chete yochichenu v'yachzir oisei b'seshuva. It means to get him to do tshuva. Ka'imrei hoichiach teichiach es amisecha. So, there's a difference between Mishnah Torah and Mitzvahs, where it's the teichach is preventive, or to get him to do tshuva. Now, next. So we have this basis of what we're talking about. We're either talking about preventing someone from doing a chet, or a person who is a chayte already to be machzim b'tshuva. So I would assume, if I'm not correct, if mistaken, lo chich hachayte at the beginning is the purpose is to stop from doing chet, not to be machzim b'tshuva. Now, so then the continuation is אבל אנחנו מצווים שלא נמרה or שלא nechte, that the person shouldn't, we should try to make sure he doesn't do chet. ושלא נעזב זולתנו ממוסנו, we shouldn't allow a Jewish person to do chet. ואם משתדל לעמוס, if he's on his way, he's trying to be chayte, chayav mono lo chicho lo yeshivoi. But I don't know, lo yeshivoi means, because Kapach translates lo yeshivoi not as he learns. So this, it's exactly what he expected in Sefer Mitzvahs to stop him doing Avera. V'alpi shel yotza olav edus yechayiv olav din that they would mechayiv an oynish v'omo yisale hochich techiras hamitzvos. I am confused. This sentence doesn't make any sense. What does the mitzvahs techacha in Sefer Mitzvahs have to do with Einshim that the Rambam has to make a separate remark that even though he's not chayiv and oynish, there's still a mitzvah techacha. If the mitzvah is to menei the person from doing an aveira, so what does it do with oynish? And what's his apology? You see, if it's a shum and aveira and the chiyuv techacha is b'teres chayte, and you want to do tshuva, so the challenge to get someone to do tshuva who's chayiv and oynish, maybe it's a greater challenge, maybe it's more of a chayte, and that itself is machayiv, and the chiddush is even though he's not chayiv and oynish, he's still. But if you go the way he's going in Sefer Mitzvah, we don't understand this parenthetical remark, alpha p. For Amma Yis'aleh, we'll come back and see more and more, but let's just get it into and see what's the information that's in front of us. The Afal she lo yotza olav edus, there was no edus shechayiv olav din, for Amma Yis'aleh, he's not chayiv any oynish, for Amma Yis'aleh, hoichech teichich es amisech. Then he continues, and this will be the amazing thing. V'nichnas b'tzivu hazeh, or as Kapach translated, which is much better for us in terms of understanding what's going on. He says, "V'gam nichlal b'mitzvazu." So there's something else, and nichlal, I could assume it's not the ikar mitzvah, but it's like, it's also part of the mitzvah, like we had in Simchas Yontiv, that the ikar mitzvah is Achila Shalmei Simcha, or whatever, Chagiga, and B'chal the mitzvah is Noshim Roim Lahem, and therefore the Rambam quotes the mitzvah Simcha in Hilchos Chagiga, not in Hilchos Yontif. So what is B'chal the mitzvah? Shena'ashim kitzoseinu l'kitzoseinu, when there's an interpersonal chet, the person who is the recipient of this terrible feeling that he had that the person insulted him or whatever happened, he should not keep it in his heart, and we shouldn't remain from Netira means shmir belev, and we should, interesting, the word in the Arabic is natakad, which is the way the Ram uses in Sefer Mitzvah, Mitzvah Aleph, and in Beis, it basically is the emunah, or the firm belief of the existence of God. And here it's a firm v'nachshav le'ovo, and to firmly believe it emotionally, I assume. Avol nitztavinu lo'chichoy b'ma amar ad shi lo yishoy dova b'nefesh. And to bring it to a point of closure that you don't have any tainas on. So here, even though the beginning is to prevent chet, afterwards, this part which is b'chal is suddenly after chet. And certainly before, it certainly includes after these chayte, and yishiyotzel of einish, because if afapi certainly was not so einish, you certainly chayiv to be moinei him. And at the beginning, shetziva lochiach hachayte, so he is a chayte. So there's also techacha. It's not just limited. Before it was limited, I assume it's not limited to a person who was chayte, wasn't chayte, about to be chayte, but maybe we said a chayte is also considered to be chayte. Okay. But there's two parts of the mitzvah. The Ika mitzvah is a person who's chayte, about to be chayte, and then a person who had an interpersonal insult, and to reprimand him in order to clear the air. Now, this next idea, the question is, what's the source of this? Why should you have the Rambam Ki'ilu talks about two parts of a mitzvah without making any statement to prove anything? And I think the statement afterwards, which he makes about ad hakor, is going back to the original case of where you're stopping a chayte to be chayte, or the Ram Mishneh Torah, where you want him to do tshuva. So what he quotes afterwards is also no proof for this. So this is a hanging discussion in the middle with a priori no basis for it. So here, I think it's clear, and I'll just say it now, we'll see, that the Rambam learns that an interpersonal insult is pshuto shel mikra, of hochach tוכיח mitzvah. And how do I know that? You go to Mitzvas Loisa Session Gimel, the last line of a pshat hakosuv, harihu mazhir v'leisisol of chet, shelei tachshav le'ovoin bilvad belibcho v'tazkirehu. The leisisol of chet is not to be moichiach, and to hold this in your heart, that he is insulting me, and he is a chite negdi. That's lo sisel of chet. So then, l'chayr to double poshit. The hochach tוכיח es hamitzvos in pshuto shomiko is a person who is chite negdi. The Ramban in Chumash also does this. The Ramban in Vayikro, Perek Yud Tes, Posuk Yud Zayin, Vanochein, Be'enai, Ki Hochiach Tוכיח, K'moi Voichich Avrom Es Avimelech, Vayoyim HaKosuv, Avimelech did something bad to him, right? And he gives Hochich Avrom es Avimelech. Vayoyim HaKosuv al tisnes Hochich V'ovecho b'asois lecho shelo kitzon. He's doing something bad to you. Some personal insult. Avol tochichenu madua kacho osisa imodi. Why did you do this to me? V'lo sisol of chet lechasoisin also. Believe he's going to hide in your heart. V'lo takid lo, which is exactly what the Ram says in Shin Gimel. Kibo chicho isoi yisnatzel lecho, and he'll apologize. Or Yoshuv yizvad al chetoi. And will be misvada or apologize or something. But see, and the Yachid Shimoni, but I assume according to the Rambam in Parshas Kedoshim, Omar Beloza B'Masya im Yesh Dovo Bein Chol Veinoi Omreu, speak it out. Omreu loy v'al tehei choyte boy lekach nema v'leisisel of chet. By holding in your heart your choyte. But you don't need this measures because it's the pshuto shamik according to the Rambam. So then, if this is the way we're looking at things, that the Ika Mitzvah is techocha ala chet, prevent the chet, or after the chet. And there's B'chlal Mitzvah also of an interpersonal insult. See, ask the question, why does the Rambam play it out this way? Maybe the opposite way. Say the Ika Mitzvah is the personal insult, as Pshuto Shamikra dictates. And maybe, there's also included that there's a chayte with the Gemara and Eichin. So what happens is the Rambam here in Minyan HaMitzvos is machadish when it's the stira between a Pirush Mekubal, which is the Gemara and Eichin, talking about a chayte, and Pshuto Shel Mikra, which we're talking about a personal insult. The mitzvah is nikva, like the Pirush Mekubal. Derech Agav, B'chlal the mitzvah is also the Pshuto Shel Mikra. I think it's an amazing conclusion, but I don't see a way out of it. And it's also so poshet to the Rambam that he doesn't have to explain anything. He just says, this is the Ika Mitzvah, this is not like that. And in the Shin Gimel, he points out that it's Pshuto Shel Mikra. And how do we know that it's a Pirush Mekubal? Because the Sefer, which he quotes later, which is like the Mon Eichin, the Sefer, and you remember, Stam, according to the Rambam, some Sefer Stam Sifri, Stam Mechilta is a Pirush Makubal. And the Sifra says, Minayim Yochachta Yabo Chamisha Pomim Yarzu Yochiach. Talmuloim Mochir Tachir Yochal Afilu Im Mochicho Ponim Mishtanois. Talmuloim Lisisel of Chet. I didn't even know. Think about it. I have this idea of Tוכיח again and again and again might only be Bechleiti to get him to do tshuva or get him to stop to do chet. But if there's an interpersonal insult, you tell the person and he heard, and then that's it. I don't know if to go again and again and again and again. We have such a din. This is something major. That when there's a stira between Pshuto Shomika and the Pirush Makubal, the Ika Mitzvah is the Pirush Makubal, and B'chlal the Mitzvah is the Pshuto Shomika. Now, that is Minyan Mitzvahs. The question is, what happens in Mishnah Torah? Here, open up. Hamitzvos Teis, Perek Vav. It's interesting, the Ram starts off with the interpersonal Aveira. K'sheyechti ish, Perek Vav, Halacha Vav, in Hamitzvos Teis. K'sheyechti ish li ish, it's an interpersonal Aveira. Lo yistamenu v'yishtoik. You shouldn't hold it in your heart and be quiet. K'mo shenema b'rishoyim v'leidiba Avshalom im Amnon l'meirav yatei ki sonei Avshalom es Amnon. The reason why he didn't say anything, he had an uncontrolled hatred of him. Ela mitzvah olav loidiyoi. The mitzvah is v'loy maloi lomo asisli kach b'kach v'lomo chotosili b'dova ploni. That's what you should say very clearly. Why did he do this to me? Shene'emar hoicheach tochiach es amisecho. V'im choze ubikesh meno limcho loitzorach limcho. V'lo yehei amoichel achzori. Shene'emar, v'lo yehei amoichel achzori, shene'emar v'yispal avrom el hoelokim. And you can only, I guess, mispalel if you actually moichel. So then he goes on and says, in Halacha Zayin, le chaveroi shechoto o shu hoilich b'derech lo toivo, which we discussed. Maybe it's midos, whatever. Mitzvah lahachziroi lemutov ulodia shu choyte al atzmoi b'maas avoroyin shenema oichech tochich zamisecha. So this is what we had in Minyan Mitzvahs at the beginning, but the question there was before Chet, and here it's after Chet. The question is, what happened over here? Are there two parts to this mitzvah? And this idea, when there's this stira, you kavei lika mitzvah like this and not like that. And here he's saying they're both the mitzvah. And therefore he's mocked him. The other case. the case of Pshuta Shel Mikra, the interpersonal hochach and interpersonal avera, to the other case, the case of a Pasha Chayte. The question is, how does this play itself together? So a priori, I would said that that the Ram holds that both are equal, and the mitzvah is the conglomerate, both of them. On the other hand, there's a problem here, because the Rambam quotes the pasuk, "Shenemo echech tוכיח עמיתך." See, oh, excuse me, sorry. He says, "Ela mitzvah olav loidia v'loy maloi lomo asis likach b'kach shenema." And then he has mitzvah salachera. When there's a stira, they can both, I assume what's happening, and they can both be the mitzvah. One is Pshuta Shel Mikra, and the other is a Pirush Makubal, and both are Kayim, and both to make a mitzvah. And here, he reverses the order. In Minyan mitzvahs, the Ika mitzvah is the Pirush Makubal, and the other is B'chlal. Here, I don't know what's B'chlal, what's not B'chlal. Maybe they're both equal, but he's mocked him and starts with Pshuta Shel Mikra. It's a whole interesting, different approach in Minyan mitzvahs. On the other hand, so that would have been okay. That would be very interesting and beautiful. Problem is, he says, in Aloches, Hamochiches Chaveiroi, Chilo, Lo Yidabe Lo Koshes, Ad Sheach Limenu. He shouldn't speak very harshly and shame the person. Shenema Lo Yisisa Olav Chet. Kach Omer Chacham, Yochli Mochicho Pon Mishtanois, Tamuloimo Lo Yisisa Olav Chet. Mikan She'osel Achim Is Yisrael V'Kol Shkein B'Rab. So this all is very nice, but this pshat in Lo Yisisa Olav Chet is only the Pirush Makubal. But Pshuta Shel Mikra, it's to harbor ill will against the person and not to be mochiach. And l'chayra, if the thesis is they're both in Mishnah Torah, they're both of the mitzvah, the Pshuta Shel Mikra and the Pirush Makubal. So what happened to L'Sisa Olav Chet? Why is there an expression of the Pshuta Shel Mikra in Mishnah Torah? So it's a very intriguing question, which has been bothering my mind. What's the relation between the two? And it'd be nice, to compare and contrast the Ramban about this, but that's not really the topic now. But the Rambam himself, in Minyan Mitzvahs, you would say that the Pshuta Shel Mikra is only a Bichlal, and the Ika Mitzvah is the Pirush Makubal. In Mishnah Torah, you could imagine they're both, but then you're bothered by the question of you left stranded, what happens to L'Sisa Olav Chet in Mishnah Torah? There's no mention of it at all. But Pashtus is, at least in terms of Chech, Tוכיח, Amitzvos, in Mishnah Torah calls both in a mitzvah. So they're all equal. And maybe that's what the Rambam in the Prati Mitzvah says, Lo Yichiach Stam, to include all cases. Both the chayte and the interpersonal insult. I'm not sure the Ramban anyway would accept this approach that I suggested, Sefer Mitzvas. So you call the Ramban and Shiur Sheni calls the Drashas Chazal, not even Drashas Chazal, and certainly Pshuta Shel Mikra as the Pshat Pnimi, and the Pshuta Shel Mikra is something else, and both are Pshat. So to say that this is Ika, not Ika, I'm not sure I would see that in the Ramban. But we have to understand, and that's to understand Derech HaPshat and Ramban, that itself is a major discussion, which we can have at some time if you like. Now, continue further. Nicholas Ilazeh, Shenash Kasenu Senu, Ksheyechte, Ish Yimenu Liish, Loinito Loi. It means netira without techacha. So, besides the lav or leisito or leisisna, there's a bitul aseh of a chech teches amisecha. And you look in Perek Zayin of Chazdeis Halacha Ches, you get the impression if he doesn't say and holds in his lev, there's a problem of Matira. Because he says Halacha Ches Elayim Chadova Miliboy V'lo Yitrenu Shekol Zman Shu Noiter Es Hadova V'zoicha Shema Yovo Lincoln Lefiglich Pida Teira Al Natira. There he's talking about tira, but I guess just remembering it might be enough. However, so you get the impression just remembering it, not saying anything, seems to be a problem, whether that's Natira or Natira is dafka. If you ask for something and giving it and not doing and you didn't, the person didn't give it to you, and then he asks you and you say you're not like him or whatever it is, or is it only that case or it's in general Natira? Because the problem is really in Minyan HaMitzvos, the Loises of Shinhei. He says, "Hailnu shalinto v'afal pi shalon nishalim gemur v'usheniska avoim lonu hachete v'naskirehu loy." So in Mishnah, in Sefer Mitzvas in Loisas Shinhei, Natira is only if you're vocal about it. The question in Mishnah Torah, when he says about Natira, maybe the Rambam in Mishnah Torah learns that Natira is even believed. In Sefer Mitzvahs, that's not clear at all. So, but anyway, when he says over in Yishtad, when he says Kishiech Adam v'loi nitoloi, that's not the lav. because in Sefer Mitzvas, the lav is only with amira, not belief. But it's a stira to the mitzvah of hechach tוכיח עמיתך, of the personal insult. And maybe it's also the lav and pshuda shamikra, like sisal of chet. Avo nitztavinu lochicha b'maima should be vocal. This is very interesting. Let's say you mochich the person with sign language. It has to be b'maima or convince him. I'm not sure, because the Ram has mitzvahs dibur in Shiur Chi. Is hechach tוכיח b'maima and dibur b'dafka? So, and here he says, "Avnitztavinu lochicha b'maima." Actually, shoydov b'nefesh is to get out of your system. They shouldn't have this natira against the person. So here's interesting. What does it mean, ad? In Ibn Tibin? Is this a shiurim? You have to mochicho until you reach that point? This is not clear, because a kapach translates kedei, and in many times Ibn Tibin says ad, and kapach translates kedei. The reason for the techacha is that you should rid yourself of the this feeling against him in your heart. It's not exhume the kiyum mitzvah, it's the purpose of the mitzvah. So he had two parts, the mitzvah hocha of a chet for miniyas achet, and then there's the interpersonal insult with the hocha in order to remove it from your heart. And then for Loshen Sifra, he's going back to the first case with the mitzvah v'chocha of hechach tוכיח עמיתך in the Ikar mitzvah, when a person's chayte, to stop from being chayte. Minayin she'im hoichachta afilu arba v'chamisha pomim chazor v'cheach tamloi mochich tוכיח. Yochol afilu atamochichoi upon the mishtanois, and you're making him ashamed, you're making him turn red upon of mishtanois. So sisal chet is part of mishtanois, and we're talking about from an aveira, not from an interpersonal aveira. And the Rambam does the same thing. Here, you might disagree with me, but I want to prove what I said. The Rambam loisas shin gimel. He shes hilnu shelo levayesh kitzasenu lekatzasenu. It's not to mevayesh him. V'chulei v'amrei hechach tוכיח עמיתך loisisal chet u'v'sifro minayin im hoichachtoi arba v'chamisha pom yachzav yochiach tamaloima הוכח תוכיח סמיס יוכל אפילו אם מוכיח upon המשכנוס, תמלוימה לא יסיס עליו חטא. This is a person who's on his way to be chayted. Hapshat me'aposek hu shehizeh sheloi tachshev loi oboim v'nafshecho v'tazkirehu. And you remind him. So the Hechech Tוכיח and Sifra is certainly talking about the Ika Mitzvah. Is the Ram there quoting the Pshat because he learns that's also Aseh, but that's the Ika Mitzvah and he does the same thing that he did here? Because he doesn't say much. He just says that's only Pshut Shal Mikra. And I pointed out, Mishnah Torah, there's no mention at all of this. So you have a problem. Monashach is what's Pshuta Shal Mikra Mishnah Torah? Is it important? So that's how we get Hochech Tוכיח to have the other pshat. And if it's not important, if it's important, he should have had like Sisal of Chet also. And if the Pshuta Shal Mikra doesn't exist, and therefore doesn't call the Sisal of Chet in terms of remembering the Chet, then how did he get Hochech Tוכיח for the person insulted me that I have to tell him to get it out of my system? So no matter which way you go, you don't know where you're going. Now, the Ram continues. Fa'abil ha'chachamim shechiyu mitzvah zo al kol odom. You understand yourself. The chiyu mitzvah zo al kol odom, l'chayr is referring to al chet. You see a person chayte, so you have to, anyone who happens to know that the person is a chayte should give him mussar. Fa'abil chachamim and then l'chayr is contrasting before that chiv al kol adam as opposed to the insult that's only the person who was insulted. And kol adam means everyone and also every part of society. And that's what he says. Afilu hapoch is the nichbod, someone who's not so special, endowed with something, or someone who looks like a very special person. Hapoch is a nichbad, and his kapach says min hakoton legodo, and that's understood. That or to Talmud Torah or something, who chayev lo chichoy, vafilu kilu oisayu bizeu. Even if he's makal him, even if the chayte is mavaze him, he still has to continue. V'lo yosum lo chichoy ad shiakeu, until he's makeh. Kmo shebiru mekabel yatera v'yomroi ad akot. So here, this l'chor, the pochas to the nichbod, is the Gemara Mitzvah, Alam and Aleph, ainly a l'rav l'Talmud that has to give mussar. Talmud l'rav minayin tamaloy moichech tochiach mikol mokoy. And that's the Rambam. in Talmud Rav and the whole thing, I feel kikolo, it means everyone. So kol adam means every person in society has this obligation. Now, the Rambam adds ad hakol, which the Rambam is passing like Rav in Eichin Tezayim Na'alef, and everyone asks, why doesn't pass Rabbi Yochanan? Ad Eichin hakol, Rav Omar ad Eichin Teichocha, Rav Omar ad hakol, Ushmuel Omar ad Klolo. So he's quoting the Klolo over here, and he starts to continue, not like Shmuel. Rabbi Yochanan ad Nezifa, until he starts screaming at you. So I assume Vafil Kiloyu Bizeu. So it's not like Rabbi Yochanan either. Ketanoi Rabbi Lezer and Arko Bishum at Klolo Benazirim ad Nezifa. The Rambam does the same thing in Mishnah Torah. In Perek Vav Halacha Zayin, Chaveiro Shechota v'chulei Shenema Achichtich Misecha V'im Kibel B'meno Muta V'im Lav Yochichenu Pam Shnia U'Shlishis L'chein Tomid Chayiv Odom Lohechichoi Ad Shiakehu Achoyte. So it means, according to the Rambam, the Klolo Nizifa, the Yistil Mechuyev, Hako is a Shiur Mitzvah. So the pshat is, the Ram says, B'chein Tomid, Chayiv Odom, Loichicho achiakehu achite v'yoimaloi eni shemeya. So I think what it means is, if he hits you, we assume that he's serious, that it's not going to help anymore. He has to say it's not hitting is the issue. Achiakehu v'yoimaloi eni shemeya. So there's no purpose anymore. So even though it's hochech t'chafil mei upon him, it's only if there's a chance you're going to be heard. But if the person hit you and he says "Eini shemeya," we assume there's no one to talk to. Rabbi Yankiv seems to learn in Bereshis, in his Pirush HaChumash, on Chavtes Daled, he learns the pshat is that Hoch has to be be'avo. And therefore, upon the Mishtanos is not be'avo. And if he hits it, then it's also not be'avo. But I don't understand why the Rambam adds any shemeya. So I would say it's not an issue that Teichoch has to be be'avo, but Teichoch has to be nishmas. And if he's makeh and he says "Eini shemeya," it's not nishmas. That's what I would say. Now, so the Chayra, when he says "Kmo shebiru makabel atayra v'amur," the Omu Arakah, there's a machlokes Tanoia about this. You get to the old problem that the Pirush, is this a Pirush Makubal Makabel Atera? They're telling you what they heard. So what, there's a machlokes, and that's about what the Shiur is? It's very odd. But I assume it's the same pshat according to them. With Nizif and Klola, they say Eini shemeya. And the question is, the Rama Paskins, that if he's makeh, then we know that he's serious. So, Mitzvah Hashem, Next week, regular time, Monday night, we'll take up the issue of Ve'after L'Reacha Kamocha.